a little bit of reading. I open with a theological assertion. As a religious person, I believe that the evolution of species is the greatest sacred drama of all time. It is a tale, perhaps even the tale, in which the divine waits to be discovered. It dwarfs all the other narratives, memories, and images that so preoccupy the minds of religious traditions, including our own. We Jews, Christians, and Muslims are all over-involved with proclaiming or questioning the truth of our own particular stories. Did Moses really receive the Torah from God? Did Jesus really rise from the tomb? Was Muhammad really God's chosen messenger? We refine our debates about these things forever, each group certain that its own narrative is the center of universal history. But there is a bigger story, infinitely bigger, and one that we all share. How did we get here, we humans? And where are we going? For more than a century and a half, educated Westerners have understood that this is the tale of evolution. But we religious folk, the great tale-tellers of our society, have been guarded and cruel toward that story, and have hesitated to make it our own. The time has come, I believe, to embrace it and to uncover its sacred dimensions. And maybe just another 2 sentences to tell you how I understand evolution. There is a one, yes, that word one has a capital O. There is a one that is ever revealing itself to us, within and behind the great diversity of life. That one is being itself, the constant in the ever-changing evolutionary parade. Viewed from our end of the process, the search that leads to discovery of that one is our human quest for meaning. But turned around, seen from the perspective of the constantly evolving life energy itself, evolution can be seen as an ongoing process of revelation or self-manifestation. We discover, it reveals. It reveals itself to us, we discover. As the human mind advances, from our point of view, understanding more of the structure, process, and history of the ever-evolving one, we are being given, from its point of view, ever greater insight into who we are and how we got here. That one, the underlying force of being that enters into and undergoes the evolutionary process, is what I mean by God. I do not think of it being transcending or living outside the universe, being over against the universe that creates a universe other than itself. I have not believed in that kind of God since I was perhaps 18. When I discovered I no longer believed in that kind of God, but I was still a religious person, my quest for an alternative language, for an alternative theological vision really began. I discovered the Jewish mystical tradition when I was about 20, and that really set me on my path of who I became and what I have done. In some ways, my reading of evolution can be seen in a certain way as an updating of that Kabbalistic legacy. By God, I mean the one that enters into that process. Evolution is the guarding of that one in infinite forms of existence. It resides within every life form, every existence form that is. And it binds them all. The Hebrew word for God, the Hebrew word we usually translate Lord, Yud-He-Vav-He, of course is a much better word to use than the word English word G-O-D. G-O-D, after all, comes originally from the Nordic traditions, from Norse or Anglo-Saxon mythology. It was then used about the various gods of Europe, but eventually came to be applied to the biblical God once the tribes that spoke that language were Christianized. Yud-He-Vav-He has an entirely different meaning, of course. It is an impossible conjugation of the verb to be. If I have my blackboard here, my Hebrew blackboard, I put haya, hoveh, and yihiyeh on the blackboard. Was, is, and will be. I smush them together into a form that doesn't exist, and I get good Hedaveh. It should really be translated was, is, will be, and not G-O-D. That which was, is, and will be. That which is, so you say the eternal, but that doesn't capture it. Doesn't capture the dynamism of was, is, will be all at once. It's not a noun. It's a verb artificially arrested in motion. It's not a noun. It's a verb artificially arrested in motion. And if you think you got it, if you think you can make it a noun, as though to say, okay, now I know what you are, God says to Moses, Eheyeh asher eheyeh, which is to say he conjugates himself. He says, if you think you got me in a little nominal box and you know what I am, I will become a verb and fly away. Eheyeh asher eheyeh. I will be whatever I will be. You will not catch me in a little box and say, you have a word and now you know what God is. So it is that underlying one that enters into the ongoing dance of the evolutionary process. What I'm suggesting, of course, is that what we religious people really have to bring to the table in the conversation with science is a different set of eyes, the eyes of wonder. My late and much revered teacher, Professor Heschel, called it radical amazement. To be a religious person is to see the world with the eyes of radical amazement. We have to help look at the process of evolution with which we do not argue, with a different set of lenses. We have to be able to see it as filled with wonder, filled with mystery. A kind of mystery, of course, that science at its best also recognizes. I think of some of Einstein's writings on God, of course, as a prime example of that. But asking ourselves what it would mean to appreciate with the eyes of wonder what this journey that we are all the products of, that we are all part of, has been about. I mentioned in the book that we Jews like to celebrate a fellow named Nachshon ben Aminadav. You remember him? He was the first guy to step into the Red Sea, and the sea didn't split until it was up to his neck, and he was a great hero for that, brave man. But what about the first creatures in our history, meaning in our species history, that came out of water and stepped onto dry land? How did they do it? How did that happen? We began to have amphibious creatures. How did it happen that from one-celled animals, large creatures emerged that eventually could live on land? And those creatures that got onto the land, all of them coming from the same ancestry, differentiate themselves. Some of them put roots into the soil and gain their nourishment from the soil and become plants, and others walk around on that land and eat those plants and gain their nourishment that way. They all come, everything comes from the same single-celled creatures. And all there is the single, simple movement of natural selection. And look what came out of it. Look what came out of it. You begin to think about the interrelationship between climate and vegetation and how it happened. You look at phenomena like bees and blossoms and how they are there for one another as a result of the course of millions of years of evolution. And try to imagine how that could have happened. You can achieve that radical amazement, of course, by going to the top of a great mountain or seeing great sequoia trees, but you can also see it riding through the park as we did on the way here watching the fall colors. Those fall colors which are, as some of you may know, a pure gift for the human imagination, because we have not found any scientific benefit, any biological benefit trees gain from turning those bright colors before the leaves dry up. So it was just a gift given to us, so enjoy it. Hebrew thought understood the existence of the world as miraculous. Greek thought understood it as natural. But Hebrew thought by the Middle Ages began to talk about something they called Hanes B'toch HaTeva, the miraculous within the natural. That the natural itself is miraculous. You might say that on this small, otherwise undistinguished planet, something happened that is so wondrous, that is so amazing, that it deserves to be called by the name miracle rather than just the name nature, without making any claims outside the natural realm for it. So that the natural and evolutionary process itself has to be seen as miraculous. That's what I mean by the eyes of wonder. Learning to see things through the eyes of wonder. What I'm talking about, of course, is a reframing of the story. We religious people should not be in the role of arguing with science. Oh, they haven't proven a single point. Look, there's a missing link, so therefore evolution is just a theory. So we can go on teaching God created the world. That's nonsense. That's nonsense. That's not our job. Our job is not to pretend that we are scientists or to be pseudo-scientists, and so the intelligent design people don't do very much for me. But not to disclaim, not to argue, but to change the nature of the conversation because of the different set of eyes that we bring to. To be religious is to appreciate, is to stand in awe. And then another step beyond that, which I'll come to in a moment.